Life in a Native American Late Woodland Indian Village in Michigan, Part 4 by Dennis M. Morrison. So far, we've looked at a number of things. We've looked at carpentry and pottery making traditions and how the Late Woodlanders dressed and, various things about them. There is so much to cover, though. One of the things that has fascinated me for a long time is medicine of the Late Woodland Indians here in Michigan. I have had an article published probably about 12 years ago now. It was in Herb Companion magazine called Ancient Herbs Survive at Potsherd Bog, and it was an article about the old Annetton Creek site in Oscoda, Michigan, and a little boggy area there where there were an incredible amount of medicinal plants, and I know that these were present in the Late Woodland times too, and that the Native Americans availed themselves to the properties of these plants. By the way, I will put a link in the description to a video that I did a while back based on that article, again by the same title, Ancient Herbs Survive at Potsherd Bog. But I want to talk this time about the medical practices of the Late Woodlanders and the Michigan Native Americans in general. And to do that, I'm going to read some parts from Hindale's Primitive Man in Michigan, and I'll probably interrupt once in a while and interject some things that I know firsthand. But Mr. Hinsdale wrote, "The idea that diseases can be alleviated by treatment is a very old one. Certainly its origins goes down to a much lower stratum of culture than the American Indians level. Medicine is a difficult term to define. The definitions of modern physicians set forth different conceptions from those the primitive people had of its scope. Medicine and religion were so mingled in the primitive mind that it was a long time before the fundamentals of each became separable." Now I might interject here. If you'd like to learn more about the religious and medicine practices and their combination in the Great Lakes region, I'd suggest you try to get a copy of my book, Secret Society of the Shamans, that was published in the mid-1990s by Global Communications. Once in a while it comes available on eBay, and frequently it can be gotten on Amazon. But to continue with Mr. Hinsdale, he continues, this continent affords a good example of the intimate relation between medicine and religion, and the combination having developed to such an extent that most of the religious rites often very elaborate and prolonged, have as their main purpose the treatment of sickness. Prayer, songs, ecstatic adoration, supplication, magic, soothsaying, laying on of hands, fasting, feasting, massage baths, sweats, physics, narcotics, fermented drinks, bloodletting, cupping, counter-irritants, poultices, salves, draughts, signs and suggestions, signatures, taboos, tonics, and blisters were all part of the Indians' practices. Homeopathy with its similars, allopathy with its opposites, osteopathy with its manipulations, Christian Science with its sittings, spiritualism with its seances are systems in their fundamentals thousands of years older than is comprehended by most of those who practice them. Signs had to be right. Rituals had to be performed. Extra-human powers of both high and low degree had to be invoked, compensated, and propitiated. Particular spirits had to be called forth, and malign ones had to be driven away. Sometimes the patient, sometimes the doctor, sometimes other person or thing had to take the medicine or receive the treatment. One cannot describe the functions of doctors and priests separately in those times. They were usually one and the same performer, employing both the ritual of religion and the practice of the medicine man inseparably combined. There was no distinction between the two in the conception of the prehistoric invalid. Cannibalism may have had its origins in medicine, springing from the desire of the consumer to acquire the power, valor, and virtues of the consumed. And I had to pause for just a moment to let my best little friend Charlie, my black Burmese cat, into the room with me because he was scratching at the door. He loves to be in this room when I put together the audio for these videos, and I think you can hear him in the background now. He is my medicine, the best little friend I've ever had. But I'm sorry to digress. Let's continue. Cannibalism may have had its origin in medicine springing from the desire of the consumer to acquire the power, the prowess, valor, and virtues of the individual being consumed. In the conception of the savage, to partake of his body was the best way of partaking of the spirit of another person. Later, this conception took on a more refined form and very vicarious substitute was used. And I'll interject here too that there is notation in early contact documents that cannibalism was indeed practiced in the Great Lakes, but I have found nothing to indicate that it was practiced with any, well, it was very limited in scope, is what I'm trying to say. To continue, though, on the theory that a part strengthens a part, different organs and other parts of animals, such as hearts, intestines, glands, brains, feet, and hands, were eaten as medicine. Whatever appeared to benefit or work to advantage, whether in curing or preventing disease, or bringing good luck of any kind, was indeed good medicine. The Indians had a wonderful pharmacy of plants and of something to take in case of sickness. Edward Eggleston, in The Transit of Civilization, says that 300 species of plants had been collected and were used as remedies by the Indians. Nothing about the Indians' methods and habits so much impressed the early settlers as their doctoring. Charlatans and Indian doctors using hocus pocus and swamp roots claimed to have been obtained from Indian mysteries have thriven down through present times. And keep in mind this was written in the 1930s, and a lot of medications, especially patent medicines, used Indian names and supposedly Indian formulas. But anyways, it is a fact that from the botany of the New World, several of our most valuable medications have been obtained through the medium of Indians. Indians also had a rough and ready surgery and useful arts in the experience or in the emergencies of forest life, as accidents frequently happened, I'm sure. Perhaps antidotes for snake bites and poisons have been exploited as much as any of the Indians' supposed specifics. Probably amulets, fetishes, gorgets, and a very large number of the so-called ceremonial and problematical relics were a part of the medicine man's armada. I want to add here too, when Hinsdale talks about problematical relics, there's not a time, I don't think, that I haven't gone out onto a site and worked that I haven't found artifacts, obviously worked by the hand of man, that we have absolutely no concept of what they were used for. And so it is not beyond the realm of possibility that these problematical artifacts did indeed have something to do with the medicinal practices, of the culture. So the medicinal value, Hinsdale continues, of Peruvian bark, of which quinine is an alkaloid, was learned from the natives of South America by Jesuit missionaries. Ipecac, at one time so much used in medical practice, was also used by the natives of tropical South America. Cocoa, which yields cocaine, was a divine plant of the Incas. Tobacco was great medicine to the people here in the Great Lakes. Tobacco was used as medicine not only for the body, but for the spirit, for the mind. It drew the user closer to Gitche Manitou, the Great Spirit, because as the smoke ascended from your body, they believed it took the prayer up to God, Gitche Manitou. Sarsaparilla is also from tropical America. Boneset, golden seal, snake root, ginseng, lady slipper, ivy, wild cherry, prickly ash, jimson weed are among the plants common in Michigan that are claimed to have medicinal properties, and not only claimed to have medicinal properties, but indeed do have, and the Indians have known this for at least several thousand years. There was among the Chippewa and neighboring tribes a secret medicine society or lodge, the Midiwewan, that had 4 degrees, Hinsdale wrote. This ancient order had great influence as one advanced through the degrees. His ability to cure disease and his spiritual insight and powers progressively increased. Again, to learn more about the Medicinal, check out my book, Secret Society of the Shamans, which has a lot in it. I don't have a copy any longer. I gave the last one to my little girl, who's now in her 20s and married and in Florida. So I'm going to have to try to obtain a copy for myself through Amazon. And when I do, I will make some videos based on those chapters about the Medicinal so that you can I can share that with you. Now, one practice that the Indians of the Great Lakes, particularly up around the Devil's River area, Devil's Lake, Devil's River, that fascinates me, and I don't know if I say this right, but it's trepanning, where the skull is open. And this fascinates me particularly because my stepson David, who we live together, has hydrocephalus, and in the probably, I'm trying to think how long I've known David now, but it's been, well, probably about 13 or 14 years. He's had over 25 brain surgeries where they've opened his skull and placed shunts to drain the excess fluid. And the thing is, I've been able to see a lot of the procedures that they've done with him, and the conditions have to be sterile because of the contaminants that can get in and wreak havoc. And yet the ancient people who lived up by Alpena and Shamanic opened the skulls of patients, I would have to assume, and they did it without having to worry about the sterile surgical rooms and that. So Hinsdale wrote a little bit about this too, and I would like to share that with you, and he titles it Perforation of Skulls. And it's really a fascinating chapter. Years ago, he wrote, a very important mound discovery was made as narrated by Mr. Henry Gilman in what is now called the Great Mound of the Rouge River near Detroit. A number of human skulls that were taken from the mound had been artificially perforated. The apertures varied from less than a half inch to nearly an inch across. They were round with somewhat flaring edges, some giving evidence of having been bored with a stone point or flint drill. Similar specimens were found elsewhere in the eastern part of the state in the Lake Huron drainage. Mr. Gilman states that the perforations were made after death. There is in the University Museum a specimen of real trepanning from near Devil's River Mound, which is near Alpena and Shamanic. A very symmetrical hole was bored in the top of the skull while the person was still alive. The edges of the opening show unmistakable evidence of a well-advanced healing process which could have only gone on during life. Trepaned skulls have been found in places far distant from here, being very numerous in Peru and in Mexico. From nowhere, however, in the Great Lakes region have many, if any, been reported except from Michigan. So all the states and Canada surrounding the Great Lakes have virtually no record of this ever having been performed, but yet up there by Alpena and Shamanic, which is a very unusual area anyways archaeologically, the natives practiced this. For another really this non-medical thing that took place up there, see my video called the Knobcauzoan Discs of Alpena, Michigan. I'll put a link to that also in the description up above, because it was the only place in the entire Great Lakes area that these kind of discs were found. So anyways, I'm sorry I got off on that. Check that out though if you get a chance. Anyways, where we left off. From nowhere, however, in the Great Lakes region have many, if any, been reported except from Michigan. One might ask why the skulls were perforated. In the majority of specimens, the operation was probably performed after or immediately preceding death. Mr. Hardlicka suggests that the skulls bored after death were so treated for the purpose of securing the button as a fetish. Some of the heads might have been operated upon with a view of removing pieces of weapons for restoring the shape of the head after a severe thump. The skull in the museum to which reference has been made shows no evidence of either injury or disease having been present. In directly the center of the vertex are the unusual perforations. The operation may have been performed for some medico-religious reason, to let the bad spirit out or a good spirit in. But either of which, of course, is wild conjecture. The fact remains that perfectly normal skulls were trepaned while the subject was still alive. Professor Roy S. Moody asserts with great assurance that ancient trepanning was for the relief of headache. And I might add, this is what I believe the case was. It is surprising to note that in the Handbook of American Indians under Medicine and Medicine Men, the statement trepanning has never been found north of Mexico. We may safely say that trepanning, though not extensively practiced, was a distinctive trait of Michigan culture. Of itself, it constitutes a topic well worthy of intensive study. Where did it come from? How did the Native Americans up on Thunder Bay, Devil's River, Devil's Lake, in Alpena and Ossining come upon this knowledge so isolated that they could possibly relieve headaches by opening the skull? And I'll add one even more, because I don't believe just typical headaches they would do this for. I believe, after my experience with my stepson David, that the Indians, the Native Americans there, opened the skull because they knew it would relieve the internal pressure of too much fluid in the skull and in the spinal column, which is what hydrocephalus is. And left in and of itself, it causes the skull to expand and can actually crack the skull because the pressure becomes tremendous and the pain becomes unbearable. They would probably have noted the change in the size of the skull, the change in the behavior of the person, the seizures the person was having, and some very smart individual had thought to open the skull and relieved the pressure that was there. But at any rate, it is common to find pieces of pottery with holes broken through the bottom, Hinsdale writes. While the pots were not damaged in any other way, they were purposely punctured, probably at some time or the same time of being placed in graves. Such specimens are said to have been killed. That is, they were broken through so as to release the spirits that they contained, because the Indians, let's not forget, believed that everything inanimate also had a spirit. He continued, besides killing pottery, the custom was in some districts to kill weapons, pipes, and other entombed articles. This may account for finding so many broken specimens in graves and in mounds. The killing set free the spirits of the object so they could readily take flight with the spirit of the dead person. Is it not possible, he wrote, that the same animistic conception that led to the killing of pottery, weapons, etc., was also a reason for perforating human skulls? He asks. The killing would, according to an Indian's conception, enable a quicker release of the spirit. Now, that might be possible in some cases. And I can even see that in some instances that a piece was taken out of the skull in this method and used as a fetish, to maybe secure the special hunting abilities or warring abilities or something that the individual had. But that can't be said of the skull from the Ossining Alpena area, because it was healing when the person died and had been healing for a considerable period of time. The Native American Indians of Michigan, whether it's the Archaic period or the Woodland periods, are nothing less than fascinating. They had an incredible environment to live in, and they had an incredible culture. And it would be so amazing to see what that culture would have become had the Europeans not come into Michigan and ruined the neighborhood, so to speak. Well, anyways, thanks for taking a listen. If you have comments on the additions to what I put here about the medicines of the Native American Indians in the Late Woodland in Michigan, or any other period, please feel free to leave your comments. I always am delighted to have them, whether they agree with me or or mock me or support me. I'm happy to hear from you in any regard. So until next time when I do part 5 of this series, thanks for taking a listen. And to Jordan, Jackie, and Noah, hey, you guys are awesome. God bless you. Bye-bye.